Hello. These are vases that come from a cylinder shape, and I thought I'd start with a cylinder shape and show you how to aim for either one of these. You can do a lot of it with your hand. We can use various kinds of things to reach in. This is a normal stick with a sponge on the end, and it can be used to reach in. And also, there are different kind of tools that have a more rigid object on it. So this is a fairly normal cylinder. You want to make sure that your cylinder for any of these vase shapes has a top that's pretty stable. So one thing that you can do is use the sponge and round the sponge over the rim, and that will help stabilize it. When the rim becomes narrow, anything that is a wobble about it is going to call attention to itself a little more. So we'll see how to try and avoid that. So let's say you can get a cylinder. I don't have to leave too much extra clay through the middle here, although it should not be weaker here. Your normal cylinders, as you throw them, you can look at it either as having the more correct shape on the inside of this shape, or you can have it on the outside. I tend to throw in such a way that the inside is more like I want it to be, and the extra clay is on the outside where I can either shrug and live with it or actually trim it off. On a narrow vase like this, you don't want to set up a whole lot of trimming, and moreover, you certainly don't want to set up any trimming for the inside of a shape. So I still have one or two more pulls to go before I get to a certain height. When you attempt one of these shapes, you're probably going to get to a certain height, and that's within an inch of the final height. And then, as you shape it, that clay will shorten a bit. So we'll allow for that. So I'm going to put some water on the clay, and I'm going to put some water inside the clay. I've already compressed the bottom. When you make bottles like this, there are certain things that almost always come to trip you up. One of them is that as you attempt to make your wall on the bottom, make it thinner, you pinch too hard, and then the whole system becomes unstable. Another thing might be that as you push in like this super hard with your hand or your sponge, but it's getting narrower here. So you want to have enough pressure on the inside for this kind of thing. So I'm going to do another pull with my fingers. So this will be a pull from the bottom to the top. So my inside fingers are going to be at an angle, like the angle of this bar against the bucket, and my finger in here. And outside is just upstream. And I'm going to do my fingers relatively high. So my wrist is fairly high from my fingers, so that as I'm smearing them, there aren't any grooves. Later, I'll let on another shape I might want grooves, and that's when my wrist is lower. But here, it's going to be like this. On the way up, become a little bit weaker on the inside hand, and toward the top, be almost all. Like if I let all the way go, it doesn't change much of what's going on. If you have equal forces on both sides, then that's why it's going to flare out and become a bowl. This is a perfectly good diameter and thickness for a rim that's going to end up somewhere up here in space that's like those shapes. You're going to have a transition at some point between a pull that is going to be successful all the way from the bottom to the top and a pull that won't be successful all the way from the bottom to the top. So I'm going to show you a couple hacks once you realize that you're past that point. You can take your rib and make the wall more stable. This isn't necessarily for throwing. This is for stabilizing it. If you do a pull from the bottom and it becomes a little bit wobbly, then stabilize it with this part here. And that will help. Yes, it makes it smoother, which is nice, but usually it's taking the whole wall. So now let's do another pull. When you use a rib on the outside, that tends to remove off any slip, and you may want to put it back on because it'll be very grabby. So I'll do another pull. I can still reach my fingers inside. There we go. Look at the grooves that are left behind from my fingers and how spaced they are. They're not thinner than a dime, and they're not more than too much. There's an air bubble in here. I guess I have to live with that now. All right, so now I'm worried that when I throw from the bottom to the top, something's gonna happen here that I'm not gonna like. So I'm gonna start doing hacks from the top third, then the middle third, and then the bottom. So I'm gonna go from here upwards. And here's a new bit. Both hands are moving upwards. Now my inside hand has stopped the height and my outside hand is continuing up and over. That means it's getting thinner, but is absolutely not becoming a ball. In fact, it's going inward. That went pretty well. Let's say something went wrong. You could do some of this. There we go. So now we're gonna go to the middle. And I want to be careful from the middle to here because this particular stretch is difficult. See that little bump? I've got an air bubble friend. Now you don't want to make the top of the cylinder too thin. If you were making a vase, you might, but when this gets all compressed in, if it's too thin, it's going to ripple up like the edge of a clam, and that's not going to be what you want. So that one went pretty well, and now I can reach inside. Now I can probably get inside. Yeah, there we go. So I've got two goals from here. I want to make the clay wall thinner, but also I might want to move the clay wall from where it's connected to the wheel a bit smaller, because the inside bottom is only about that circle, which is kind of what I'm aiming for those. Let me make sure I'm pressing hard enough. I'm taking my inside fingers all the way at the bottom, and I'm aiming from the inside here, and we're going to see a little bulge happen. There, that. Now I know that I can defend the inside bottom well. I pull back on that kind of pressure. So this is a pull in the bottom third. Now it's kind of in the middle 1/3. And now I'm actually going to leave it alone because this needs to be stable to solve that problem. Okay, so once you start to close things in, you'd better get water out of it first. Oh, let me show you. So we're going to use this stick to get the water out. We're going to use it in a minute to, wow, that was a lot of water. There we go. So here's the general gesture for these long pieces. You want to hold this in a really strong grip, not dainty, nothing like that, because you're going to be aiming it in the center and doing some kind of pivot here to get it to be your inside touch. You're going to be traveling upward more or less at the same rate, just like you would with your inside hand. The manufactured sticks can sometimes come with a little wooden shape that looks like a P or a B or a D. And what I'm doing here is I'm just getting the water out. So let's try and just get this into kind of an eggplant shape, like this. Gentle all around the whole thing and slightly skimming upward. Let's look at the amount of dent happening here. Take this thickness as kind of like the track it's in or the orbit that it's in. When I push this in, I'm only denting it in like one of itself a little bit. If you squeeze super hard, I'm going to do it for a second so that you can see, and then I won't really do it. If you squeeze super hard and you make a mistake, you'll get bad news in a hurry. There we go. Now, when you make pulls from a tall cylinder, and your hand can go all the way in, it's already hard because neither hand is helping each other. It's now a little bit doubly hard because now you have a stick. But usually I can get my thumb on the stick here. So this is for force and direction, and this is for stability, like the screw in the middle of a scissors, and then this here is not bad. So I'm gonna do one pull here and see what happens. It's wet, now I'm going up. I'm pushing my fingers right onto the sponge. There we go. That went fairly well. And now let's not do it again. So I just wanted to show you that is possible. Let's see what's next. So let's say we're aiming at this rounded shape. This rounded shape up here where it's really visible is going to happen in throwing. This narrowness, don't be too tempted to make it while it's wet or you may collapse it over. Allow for yourself to have a little extra clay here and get this detail when you trim it. But all of this is going to happen. So this is going to start from a gradually sloping piece, and then it's going to get necked in here. The carving, of course, happens after. I'm going to have to wash that off later. Okay, so how do I get from here to closer to that? I'm going to use this pencil to remove off some of this extra clay. Because I'm not going to want to trim it, and I've decided that my throwing lesson is no longer about the clay down there at the wheel. There we go, pencil. Okay. So now we have a clear view of the bottom. So with our clear view of the bottom, I'm going to start to round this out. Let's try a rigid tool. So I'm going to aim the tool up in here, and I'm going to leave alone the top. So up in here is going to get stretched. So there's going to be a window. It's going to be stable under and stable over. So you can either do it like this, or sometimes I do this. So it's happening here, and the real stretching is happening on the inside, and I'm using my fingers to stabilize above and below. That nice design, the weight of it is in the lower third, so I'm going to go back to this place. So let's say you want to push this out, but you don't want the bottom to also move. So this outside finger is like a restraining touch. Choke up on this a bit. Oh, one thing that you might want to do is this. So put the end of the tool on the wheel and put your hands where they don't hit, so that now you have a sense of when you are deepest, you have this kind of idea. Okay. All right. I have enough water. Whoops. Be careful you don't lean it on here. So I'm holding these fingers here still. There, see how it's widening? And I'm going to go up a little bit. There's that bubble. That bubble is like, are you annoyed at me yet? Okay, so the way this grows, you might film a balloon being inflated. This is going to just inflate all the way around. The common problem is that you get this all poofed, and then there's a weakness here. So we're going to try and avoid that. Let's try the one with water. So we'll do a pass with a bigger tool that has more water. I like these stretch shapes. So let's say something gets all weird up in here. We're going to do a few correcting moves. So the earlier correcting move is to take what we have. We're not finished shaping or throwing, but we're going to take this shape here and lean it onto here so that this curve resembles something like an egg. Anything like an egg or a hanging chain is going to be a smooth curve. You could stop here if you like it, but this is just to make sure that your pot will end once there's a severe bump up in here. And I think I'm going to do some shaping. There we go. Another correcting move would be from the inside and a much more specific touch. Okay. So let's say up in here was too dented. Oh, let me just do it then. Say, okay. This happened and you don't want a vase like that. So we're going to go in there. And let's assume that you can't do it with your fingers. We're going to go in with this tool. Undo it. And then smooth it. So those things, I don't think I caused a real problem. Okay, so now what we're going to do is make this a little bit taller here. Here's the strategy. If I keep shaping through here and then I decide to do too much work at the top, it's going to twist and not go up anymore. So I'm going to begin to get closer to finished about this part of the vase, which is there. So I'm going to throw this higher. I don't want to thin it because I have a lot more strangling to do, collaring to do. Now I'm going to collar it in. My thought is that this widened place is probably further than half of the stretching, so I'm going to work on the top of the pot. Here's another way to collar it. When it's at the top of the pot here, you can use your fingers. So what you see is raising, collapsing it in, which thickens the wall, which lets you raise it more. Let's say something on here, under here became annoyed with you. Use again this. So what you'll find as you try these kinds of shapes, a bunch of these different intermediate shapes, like what I think of as commuter shapes, you can stop at any of them. They're kind of nice. The wheel speed throughout has been pretty moderate. Okay, so this is thin enough now. I envision this one being here and a little bit smaller and curling out. So now what I want to do is be much more specific and get much more close to the kind of curve that's going to happen here. So I'm going to use the wet tool. At this point, a mistake might be to use the, well, never mind, you can't get it in. The sponge is going to be a lot of friction, even though it's a lot of water, and it might drag things. If one of your problems was that it got a little bit weak, then you want something inside that's frictionless. And this is essentially frictionless. Okay. So I'm looking at this thinking that if we go to our model, I want this to be fairly round up through here. This is done, this is way too short, and then it kind of goes up to here. So I'm going to use this and put it here. Whoa, get in, get in. There, see, it's happening here. Now, this won't move and be a brat, but this might. So I'm going to hold here. And I'm going to be above the tool as it travels. There, now I'm pushing super hard so you can see it. I think that's similar. There we go. And here is just going to be expanding it ever so slightly to kind of connect with what else is going on. There we go. So this back and forth is shaping it, making a decision, figuring out whether or not I have any options, making the actual shape stronger, which may also happen to be smoother, and deciding where along this curve I had better not touch it anymore because I've maxed out on my luck that day. This could go more. Let's go here. There. Now I'm officially in the area where I am pushing my own luck. See that little ripple? That was whatever was in the wall earlier. That may come back and be a problem. Okay, this is dramatic enough toward the model, and also I think I'm running out of luck, so I'm going to start to finish it. Let's get the water out. So the sponge, if you don't push hard, is a nice generalizing tool on the inside, super soft, to smooth this. So it and the rib on the outside are pretty similar. Oh, I should say that shape has been carved a lot. This will not take much carving because I haven't left it thick at all. This is 0 too thick. There we go. So there's a couple interesting things about this that I wanted to just touch on again. The base is narrow, but it doesn't have to be because you can probably get that way during trimming. And this top neck part is what's next. And then we're done. All right. Come out. So now when I put water on it, I'm going to take a damp sponge and not drip it everywhere. Because if I use the rib on the outside and then there's water drips, it's going to be skid, grab, and it's going to give you a wobble that you didn't have. So let's finish this off. This got a little sharp, so I'm going to use my chamois and smooth this off, even though I might want it narrower. So I think I'm going to make it narrower through here, and then I'm going to have to correct. So I'm going to put water exactly in this place. And this is my smallest collaring. So finger, finger, thumb, thumb, knuckle. Oh, see that ripple? My luck ran out at the bottom and now it's almost out at the top. It's very close to stop. So if you wanted to stop here, you can use this rib and use this curve to smear it very gently. This is bumpy. Home stretch. Does that slip? My neck is a little narrower than the model. That's okay. And I'll show you one last thing. Let's say you wanted a detail. Let's say you weren't going to carve it, but you wanted something. So I'm going to use the corner of this tool and I'm going to stop it in a particular place. So I'm going to go up from the bottom, smoothing as I go. Smoothing, 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 taking whatever happens. And then I'm going to not move it up anymore and put the corner in one place and leave it there, and then take that as my design. Gives a little bit of punctuation. So we started from a cylinder, made it taller, picked where the wide place was going to be and tried to smooth it out, and used a combination of inside sticks and ribs on the outside to get a vase shape. Thanks for looking.